Hi Booktube, it's Amy, and today we're reading once again from The Anatomy of Bibliomania by Holbrook Jackson. Here on page 139 of my edition with a section titled Charms, Amulets, and Fortune Tellers. Amulets and things to be borne about for luck or to charm a life by warding off the blows of fate, chance, the evil eye, or the devil himself, I find prescribed in histories. And although their efficacy is taxed in these times by some, it is approved by others, but often by deed rather than by word, as many a trinket, semi-jocularly worn, can attest. The medicinal value of amulets is now generally denied by civilized people who have transferred their faith to drugs and serums and their allegiance to vaccinations, operations, and therapeutical religious ceremonies. The power of books to charm is, however, well known, and they have largely taken the place of amulets. In times past, amulets were included in the medical equipment of all classes. Samuel Pepys carried a hare's foot against a colic, although he sometimes doubted whether that amulet relieved him or whether he should attribute the relief of taking every morning of a pill of turpentine or to having left off wearing a gown. His doubts were set at rest later when on January 20th, 1665, he brought home a hare, and Mr. Batten showed him that it was necessary to carry a hare's foot that hath not the joint to it, assuring him that he himself had never had his colic since he carried it about him. It is strange, says Pepys, how fancy works, for I no sooner almost handled his foot, but my belly began to be loose and to break wind, and whereas I was in some pain yesterday, and t'other day, and in fear of more today, I became very well, and so continue. Next day he was mighty well, and attributed it to his fresh hare's foot. But he was again in doubt on March 26th, when he never was better in his life, though the winter had been hard, and he had gone lightly clad, wearing only a doublet and a waistcoat cut open on the back. Abroad a cloak, and within doors a coat I slipped on. I am at loss, he admits, whether it be my hare's foot, which is my preservative against the wind, but he continues to carry it. Robert Burton gives several curious instances. Precious stones are useful for most diseases. A wolf's dung borne with one helps the colic. A spider is good for ague. A ring made of the hoof of an ass's right foot, carried about, has recognized medicinal value. And he gives instances, which he contends with Renaudius, are not altogether to be rejected. And he recounts how Lavinius Lemnius set down certain amulets, herbs, and precious stones, which have marvelled virtues all prolivigandis demondius, to drive away devils and their illusions. He agrees, however, with Phillies, who flourished in the time of Michael Palagolus, that a sheep or a kid skin whom a wolf worried, and we've got a line in Latin there that translates to a goat snatched from the jaws of a cruel wolf, ought not to be at all worn about a man, because it causes palpitations of the heart, not for any fear, but a secret virtue which amulets have. And he doubted his mother's ability to cure an ague by an amulet of a spider in a nutshell lapped in silk. She had excellent skills in chiggery, but for all experiments he thought this one most absurd and ridiculous. He could see no warrant for it till at length, rambling amongst authors, as he often did, he found this very medicine in Dioscorides, approved by Metolius, repeated by Eldrovandus, cap de, and we've got a line in Latin now, and so began to have a better opinion of it. But he still believed that such medicines were to be exploded, that consist of words, characters, spells, and charms, which could do no good at all, but out of strong conceit, as Pomponius proves, or the devil's policy, who was the first founder and teacher of them. Whether he would include books in this castigation is not set forth, but perhaps not, for books have so many strange powers that no one so wise as mine author would dispute their magic, even as amulets, for as such they have been and still are used. There are many instances of the efficacy of the Bible and the New Testament and the Koran against perils, accidents, and diseases, and among the Norsemen, Lubbock reports, runes were supposed to be endowed with miraculous powers. I find a memorable modern instance of book magic in the Chronicle of Lawrence in Arabia by Lowell Thomas. Nearly all Arabs, he says, carry some sort of good luck charm, and the belief in jinn and genie is still common. The talisman, worn by Atta, a great Bedouin chief, was probably one of the most extraordinary to be found in all Arabia. It was a diminutive copy of the Quran, no more than 1 inch square, for which he had paid the sum of £200. Atta used it as his sole protection against snake bites, the only danger which fills a Bedouin with fear. He displayed his treasure with great pride to Lawrence, who discovered it had been printed in Glasgow and published for 18 pence. Sortilege, the casting of lots, has been promiscuously performed by nearly all people at most times, and notwithstanding cavils and objections, many writers, both ancient and modern, do much approve of it, and they are stiffly supported by primitive peoples, as well as by cultured sects in London, New York, Paris, and elsewhere, who seek news of their fate by gazing into crystals, casting of horoscopes, fortune-telling, palmistry, phrenology, table rapping, handwriting, mediums, and the like. As from all time, men have practiced haruspication, or divination by entrail gazing, palmistry, supplemancy by the shoulder blade of scapula, Angan from meeting with ominous animals, and astrology from the stars, consulting them as Plato and Pythagoras did when they left their country to confer with those wise Egyptian priests, and as Apollonius travelled in Ethiopia and Persia to consult with the Magi, Brahmani, and Gymnosophists. The Queen of Sheba thus came to visit Solomon, and many others, as Hierome records, went 1,000 miles to behold eloquent Livy, as countless pilgrims still journey to Rome and Mecca. And some of our own contemporaries, as Edward Carpenter and Annie Besant, have journeyed to sit at the foot of gurus in Ceylon and Matamis in Hindustan. For divination they have sought out many inventions and curious enterprises. Homer's heroes prayed to the gods when they cast lots in Agamemnon's cap, and Mopsus divined with sacred lots when the Argonauts embarked. Pliny decided to repair and enlarge the temple of Circes, which stood upon his estate in Tuscany, in compliance with the advice of harpices, or entrail gazers. The Emperor Julian took public part in the ceremonies of harupiscination amidst the sacred but licentious crowd of priests, of inferior ministers, and of female dancers who were dedicated to the service of the temple. It was the business of the emperor to bring the wood, to blow the fire, to handle the knife, to slaughter the victim, and thrusting his bloody hands into the bowels of the expiring animal, to draw forth the heart or liver, and to read with the consummate skill of a horoscope the imaginary signs of future events. Quoting there from Gibbon's Decline and Fall. Tacitus recounts how the Germans invoked the gods by small pieces of wood cut from a fruit-bearing tree, conjointly with the auguries of birdsong of flight. Horses, too, were mediums, read Herodotus, for the neighing of King Darius to his horse, or as Tacitus hath it, kept at the public expense in these same woods and groves, are white horses, pure from the taint of earthly labour. They are yoked to a car and accompanied by a priest, and the king or chief of the tribe, who note their neighings and snortings. No augury so trusted by priests or people. The priests are the ministers of the gods, and the horses are acquainted with their will. Quoting from Bibliomania by Donne. Similarly, dice are thrown for purposes of sortilege. The astragali, or knuckle bones, used of old times in children's games, were first instruments of divination. In Polynesia, the coconut is spun like a teetotum to discover a thief. Quoting there from Encyclopedia Britannica. They hope by sorcery, spells, incantations, etc., to dip into the future, to expound the mysteries of life, to receive guidance when the way is dark. They read all these charms, totems, talisman, amulets, as we now read books, for they were the precursors and progenitors of books. I think Sir James Fraser is wise in his inference that Joseph piqued himself of his power of detecting a thief by means of his divining cup. Though how he did it we know not, but people have read the mysteries in cups as in crystals, and this mode of divination is still practiced in Egypt, where it is associated, thus supporting my contention with the written word, as some of our own simple womenfolk think of what is written or what may be written when they essay to read the dregs left in their teacups. The Greeks made predictions by hydromantia, or the reading of water. In Egypt, the same process is still called the magic mirror, and Fraser cites, out of Clunzinger, how it is employed in our days. A pure innocent boy, not more than 12 years of age, is directed to look into a cup filled with water and inscribed with texts, while under his cap is stuck a paper, also with writing on it, so as to hang over his forehead. He is also fumigated with incense, while sentences are murmured by the conjurer. Anon, the boy claims to see images of persons on the water, as in a mirror. He is then ordered to make demands of these spirits, to set up a tent, bring coffee, and the like, and after a while to command from the vasty deep of the cup, for vast and deep it is, being a mystery, any person living or dead. This he proceeds to attempt. Nearer to book magic, to which I am proceeding, is that substitution of ink for water, which was poured into the diviner's hand, and thus used for detection of the living or for necromancy. The only good diviners from ink are pure young boys, black female slaves, or pregnant women, but boys are most commonly employed. A magic square is drawn with ink in the palm of his hand, and in the center of the square a little pool of ink serves as the magic mirror. While the diviner gazes in it, incense is burnt, and pieces of paper with charms written on them. When Kinglake was in Cairo, Fraser relates that of Eothen, he asked a magician, a stately old man with flowing beard, vast turban, and ample robes, to exhibit his skill. This he set out to do by employing a boy to gaze into a blot of ink in his palm, and there to decry the image of any person the Englishman might name. Kinglake would have Keat, his old Eton master, a ferocious demon of the ancient school, short in figure and in temper, with shaggy red eyebrows and other features to match, to appear. In response to this call, the youthful diviner professed to see in the inky mirror the image of a fair girl, golden-haired, blue-eyed, pallid of face, and rosy lips. Kinglake's laughter so discomfited the magician that, perceiving the grossness of his failure, he declared the boy must have known sin, for none but the innocent can see truth, and accordingly kicked him downstairs. But why do I digress? If you desire to know more particularly of what this magic is, how it influences, how it fascinates, for all that hold it still does fascinate both men and women, read it in Fraser, his Golden Bough, Rivers, Perry, etc., etc. Somewhat different are the omens to be drawn from books and the methods of drawing them. Divination by books is called bibliomancy, quoting from Roger's Manual for Bibliography, and is reckoned by many a branch of necromancy. It was much practiced in the Middle Ages, as Scott and Tennyson have recorded in the Lay of the Last Minstrel and the Idylls of the King. Alphonsus of Aragon, saith Bacon, Apogeums, was wont to say of himself that he was a great necromancer, for he used to ask counsel of the dead, meaning books. The British Museum reading room is a city of necromancers, and Herculea, in which they raise the dead, says Buller-Lytton, quoting from the Caxtons. Do I want to speak of Cicero? I invoke him. Do I want to chat in the Athenian marketplace and hear news 2,000 years old? I write down my charm on a slip of paper, and a grave magician calls me up, Aristophanes, etc. It is a world beyond the grave, a land of ghosts. A library, according to Henry Ward Beecher, is but the soul's burial ground, the land of shadows, which George Crabbe supports in his poem The Library. With awe around their silent walks I tread, these are the lasting mansions of the dead. A book is never a masterpiece, it becomes one. Genius is the talent of a man who is dead. And when a lover of books sits in his library, he is conscious of the company of friendly geniuses, who speak to him out of the grave, as Whittier's magnet among his books. The old, dead authors thronged round him, and Elzevir's grey ghosts from leathern graves looked out. Joseph Hall, in his occasional meditations, disclaims all offence of necromancy when he indulges in the happiness of calling up ancient worthies, whether human or divine. And Dr. Johnson agrees with Alphonsus of Aragon that dead counsellors are safest, because death puts an end to flattery and artifice, so that the information we receive from books is pure from interest, fear, and ambition. But from early times they have consulted these dead. My days among the dead are past, quoting there from Southey's occasional pieces, hoping to divine something of the hereafter or guidance in some present dilemma. Studious, let me sit and hold high converse with the mighty dead, quoting from James Thompson's The Seasons. Many books have been used for magical purposes, but chiefly the Bible, Homer, and Virgil. In all the intercourse of man with book, nothing is more remarkable than the sorts Virgilianae, which I essay apart, but there is a temptation and instinct towards sorts bibliothae in all bookmen. Therefore will I turn my magic books and strain out necromancy to the deep. Quoting there from R. Green's Honourable History of Friar Bacon and Friar Bungay. The love of lucky dipping into books promotes an involuntary observation of coincidences and chances in textual openings, which attract the interest even of those least inclined towards magic. In going into a great library, Professor Playfair told Miss Barry, quoting from Miss Barry's letters by Lewis, "It often occurs to me to take up some remarkable book, open it by chance, and observe what turns up, as the truths thus carelessly suggested live long in the memory." That day in the University Library he took up the Theatrum Comedicum, and the first sentence was, "Causa cometrium maxim universalis est duis." We have a quotation in our footnote here. "The most universal cause of comets is God." The truism was all he got for his pains, and it was the only piece of instruction he was likely to carry away from Cambridge, but he consoled himself by thinking some had perhaps gone away with less. If Maurice Hewlett had wished to carry the sorts out of fate, but of conduct, or rather to try the sorts not of fate but of conduct, Montaigne would have been his oracle. Here, he says, is a reflection which should have been found by unhappy Habsburg or Hohenzollern in 1914. And we have a line in French here, which translates in the footnote here to, "The heart and the life of a great and triumphant emperor are nothing but the breakfast of a little worm." God knows what the digestion of that might have saved us. Spartanus, in his life of the Emperor Hadrian, discourses of the custom of the ancients to inquire after futurity by the haphazard opening of the leaves of Homer and Virgil. Afterwards, the Christians, retaining some remnants of the pagan superstition, thought to be mighty clever in preserving the custom of making the Holy Scriptures, especially the Psalms, take the place of the pagan classics. And what is more surprising, if we may credit Agrippa of his vanity in the sciences, several members of the Sorbonne in his time approved of this twofold piece of impiety. The custom spread to France in the days of the early kings, when 3 books of the Bible, the prophets, the Gospels, and the epistles of St. Paul, were first placed on the altar or the shrine of some saint, and they maturely considered those parts of the text revealed at a first opening which were germane to their wishes. This custom was abolished by Louis the Debonair, Art 46, At nullis in solstrio vel Evangelio vel alice rebus sortiri praesumat nec divination elqueus observer. We have a footnote here which tells us that Latin translates to that no one shall presume to draw lots in the Psalms or the Gospel or anywhere else, nor observe any divinations. Thus far in general, I now turn to more practical instances. And that brings us to the end of that section on charms, amulets, and fortune tellers. And it's interesting, that whole letting a book fall open and assuming it's going to tell you something, miraculous or divine. Interestingly, you know, that's still practiced in some way in certain evangelical Christian circles in North America, whereas this kind of practice of, you know, grab your Bible from the shelf, grab your Bible, either let it fall open or stick your finger into a random page, and wherever it opens to is, you know, God speaking to you and telling you something divine, which of course is all kind of fortune-telling, divination nonsense. It's purely chance, or in some cases the structure of the book and physics where it's going to fall open. But we're ending here today on page 144. The next section will be how Pantagruel explores the sorts of Virgilianae. So I think we're going to be talking about Virgil in the next section here. But we'll leave it at that for today.